There are many characters in the Game of Thrones universe. Some are liked, some are also disliked. Today, in this video, I'm going to cover the 8 most disliked characters in House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. Starting us off at number 8 is Euron Greyjoy. Fans don't even love to hate Euron. Theon's uncle isn't disliked because of his actions, but rather the lack thereof. He is a boisterous killer who makes his presence known in the show by killing his brother and taking the Iron Islands for himself. But ever since, he doesn't do much except make somewhat hollow promises to Cersei. And although he is responsible for the death of Rhaegal and tries to kill his niece and nephew Yara and Theon, he is unlikable mostly because of his annoying arrogance and never-ending greed that isn't backed up by much. Number 7, we have Walder Frey. While not the engineer, Walder Frey executes one of the most infamous moments on Game of Thrones, and possibly TV in general. The old man, played brilliantly by David Bradley, is a lecherous and prideful tyrant when we met him. Then comes the fateful night known as the Red Wedding, when he sips wine as his men kill a pregnant Talisa, butcher Robb, and slit Catelyn's throat. Walder Frey does not do much else for the rest of the show, but the Red Wedding alone was enough to make him one of the most hated characters on the show. Number 6, we have Peter Baelish, also known as Littlefinger. Speaking of satisfying deaths, Peter Baelish possibly edges out Walder Frey. The most devious and conniving character in Game of Thrones, arguably, Littlefinger uses everything at his disposal, his smarts, spies, to achieve his goals. And he is one of the few characters on the show who act almost entirely for selfish reasons, even hurting and betraying the 2 people he claims to have genuinely loved, Catelyn and Sansa. At number 5, we have Alicent Hightower. To be honest, there are other characters on House of the Dragon who deserve fan hate far more than Alicent. But as far as the show is concerned, she did not even mean to usurp Rhaenyra. She only misunderstood her dying husband, although it goes without saying that she wanted her son on the throne anyway. But Alicent's actions draw an intense level of disdain, possibly because of her shared past with Rhaenyra. In the book, she is not really besties with Rhaenyra, but in the show, they were soul sisters growing up, even though their personalities clashed. But they drift apart slowly when Alicent gets married to Viserys, and eventually she betrays Rhaenyra. Forever a pawn and foot soldier of the Red Keep's patriarchy, Alicent, played brilliantly by Olivia Cooke, teeters on the precarious divide between a victim and a villain, and fans do not like her for failing to decide which side she wants to be on. Number 4, we have the infamous Ramsay Bolton. Ramsay was a true villain, and rotten to the core. While his father Roose has his moments stabbing knives into kings and all that, Ramsay's inhumane cruelty outdoes him by miles. The illegitimate heir of House Bolton is simply a sick, deranged man who takes joy in flaying and hurting anyone and everyone he doesn't have a use for. He torments Theon to the point of insanity. He also kills his father, followed by his stepmother and baby half-brother. But then his ambition stretches far and come back to bite him. Eventually, as often happens, he cuts a deal with Littlefinger and marries Sansa, only to rape and abuse her. But by then, she wasn't the little girl who wanted to marry a prince. Ramsay would have won the battle against Jon's army and continued his terror up north if not for Sansa. She gets Littlefinger to arrive with the Knights of the Vale just when things start to look dire, and then dishes out a very well-earned death to Ramsay, feeding him to his own hounds. Number 3, Cersei. Lena Headey as Cersei is one of the best acted TV performances ever. She portrayed the golden-haired, sour-hearted Lannister queen so perfect that some fans started calling Headey the B word in public, not able to separate the character and actor. From hating an infant Tyrion to taking full advantage of Sansa's naivety, Cersei is a villain from the beginning. Many of her early actions are seemingly fueled by her love for her 3 children, but it is also her actions that eventually get them killed. Their deaths turn her even more bitter and vengeful. Smug with a glass of wine in hand, Cersei commits one atrocity after another without any remorse. Be it losing all three of her kids in quick succession or having to suffer the Walk of Atonement, her short sightedness often brings her great grief. You almost feel sorry for her at some points. Almost. After all that and finally refusing to help fight the White Walkers in the end, Cersei deserved a more devastating death than she was given. Number 2, we have Criston Cole. This one's very popular lately to hate on him and has a bit of a recency bias, but the fan sentiment towards Criston Cole has been vividly interesting. He begins his journey on House of the Dragon as a handsome love interest for a young Rhaenyra, and seems to be a kind and soft-spoken man whose only flaw is breaking the Kingsguard celibacy oath. But all of it takes for all that to change is a rejection from Rhaenyra. Cole murders Laenor Velaryon's lover Joffrey and later Lord Beesbury in fits of unexplained anger. He becomes devoted to Alicent and remains very bitter about Rhaenyra over the years. The character only gets more insufferable in the second season. The hate got so out of hand that Fabian Frankel, who plays Cole, had to disable Instagram comments. The slurs aimed at Rhaenyra's Cole is also an incredibly selfish manipulator, often pulling strings from the shadows. But that could also describe most everyone and every character in the Game of Thrones universe. But perhaps the reason he is so hated is that he hides it all behind the shroud of the, quote, nice guy image of righteousness, a trait he kind of shares with Alicent. And at number 1, which I think you could say Joffrey or Ramsay here, but at number 1, we have Joffrey. Nothing described Joffrey better than when Tywin Lannister said, quote, any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king. Cersei's firstborn was too spoiled and sadistic for his own good. He gained all the powers in the Seven Kingdoms with neither the brain nor the brawn to bear it. And one could argue that his parent situation made him such a bitter young boy. But Joffrey seemed to have his viciousness of his own. Neither of his siblings turned out as twisted as he was. Joffrey is annoying and petulant from the beginning, so much so that when Tyrion slaps him in the second episode of the series, we already find it quite satisfying. Then he goes ahead and executes Ned and finds every occasion to terrorize Sansa. Joffrey truly believes all of Westeros is his to torment, as he tells the small council, moments before Tywin puts him in his place. His lack of tact is almost as strong as his taste for violence, which makes Joffrey basically a ticking time bomb. The only because of the people around him is that he avoids being killed in the series for as long as he did. But thankfully, Olenna Tyrell had the experience to outwit the undeserved protection Joffrey had and poisoned him at his own wedding. When it comes to satisfying paybacks in Game of Thrones, it doesn't get much better than the purple Joffrey Baratheon choking for air. Thanks for watching.